Greetings, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another pop-up episode of Truth Talk with Prophetess Dr. Tish. So I am Prophetess Dr. Tish, of course. I don't know why I said that, but anyway, I am Prophetess Dr. Tish, and I have been talking on an episode of Under Grace, trying to get everyone to understand that we are no longer under the law and that we have to stop preaching a gospel, quit teaching a doctrine, stop holding people to the old covenant, to the old life, if we understanding that we have been accepted or that we have been raised with Christ. And so with that, I've been taking us through Romans and kind of going through basic things of kind of saying, hey, this is where we're at. So with that, let's make sure we have clear understanding, clear grounds on certain things, on just terminologies that I'll be using later on. So the first one that I want to bring up is the sin. What is sin? So biblically, sin is any thought or action that goes against the will, character, or law of God. It includes both the acts of commission, which is doing wrong, and omission, which is failing to do right. So understanding that this is what sin is. We also had learned in our reading and saying that sin was in the world long before Adam and Eve had partook in the forbidden fruit. So sin was already there. However, let's go here. However, sin, it is something, since everyone who sin breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. So sin is described as violation of God's moral law, a willful disregard for his commandments and his standards. We also have sin, which is something that we know that all have done, all have fallen short of his glory. That's Romans 3:23. But also sin begins in the heart. Let's look at Matthew 15 and 18 verses 15 verses 18 through 19. It says, but the things that come out of the person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. So Jesus taught that sin originates internally in thoughts, motives, and desires, not just in outward behavior. Sin brings shame. And sin also brings death. And so wanted to make sure we have those understandings of what is sin, right? And also understand that sin was in the world prior to, and that's in, I want to say it's in Romans 6 that we discussed that. No, Romans 5. Romans 5 is where it's saying, hey, sin was in the world prior to. But what is the law? What is the law? So the law is according to scripture. So according to scripture, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to say as I'm going forth, that is going to speak on the law and how we're no longer under the law. So why are we no longer under the law? The sting of death is sin. So we know what sin is. The sting of death is sin. And the power of sin is the law. So what gives sin power is the law. Please keep that in mind as we're going forth, to understand that what brings power to sin, what makes everybody wants to do sin is the law. Galatians 3:10 says, all who rely on works of the law are under a curse, for it is written, curses everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of the law, right? Everything that's in the book of the law. Let's look at this. It is 613 commandments under the law of Moses. So if you do not do everything, look at James 2:10. It says, whoever keeps the whole law but stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. So 612 is not going to get it. 612 is not going to get it if you're going by the law. The law is what brings judgment upon us. The law brings judgment upon us. So if you look at John 5 and 45, it says, do not think that I shall accuse you. This is Jesus talking. He says, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, in whom you trust. So Moses is the one who gave them the law. They understood that Jesus, whenever he taught, that he was not teaching for them to abide by the law of Moses, that he was bringing in a new law. So even the religious leaders would say, hey, the leaders insulted the man and said, you are his followers. In other words, they were saying, you are Jesus followers. We are followers of Moses. So they understood that there was a distinction between the two. What is the biggest distinction between the two? One of it is love. And so we're going to go to John 13:34 and 35. It says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So this is one of the key indicators of knowing that someone is a follower of Jesus, right? And so when Jesus came, what he did was demolish, he got rid of the law. This is what it tells us in Hebrews 7:12. And it explains that if the priesthood is changed, which the law must also be changed to permit it. So basically, once Jesus came, he came in death. He brought death. He paid the ransom, like the Old Testament. The law of Moses and stuff, all that was just basically like a ransom letter that he had to fulfill. So he fulfilled that ransom letter through death, through a blood sacrifice. And then once he rose, that's once things changed. And that's once we went up under the new covenant, which is under grace, right? All right. So now let's pick up where we left off at. We left off starting at chapter 7. So Romans 7, verses 1-3, which says, now, dear brothers and sisters, you are familiar with the law. Don't you know that the law applies only while a person is living? So those of you who are familiar with the law. So this lets you know he's talking to those that are that know the law. That's it. He's not talking to new converts. He's not talking to people that had no understanding of what the law. He's talking to people that knew the law. And so he gave them an analogy or something that they understood. An example. He said, for example, when a woman marries, the law binds her to her husband as long as he is alive. As long as he is alive, they're bound together. But if he dies, the law of marriage is no longer applies to her. So she doesn't have to be committed to him any longer. He's dead, is gone. So that covenant is now over. A widow can remarry. So because she's now a widow, she's free. So while her husband is alive, she would be committing adultery if she married another man. But if her husband dies, she is free from that law and does not commit adultery when she remarries. So this is what he's saying. Basically, now, so verses use how I use the ransom thing, he's using the example of marriage. So basically saying like, hey, Jesus came in, or so that old covenant is death. And so now we're to be married to Jesus Christ, which is under grace. So we should not be bound to that, right? It says Romans 7:4-8. It says, so my dear brothers and sisters, this is the point. You died to the power of the law when you died with Christ. So once you died with Christ, you died to the power. The law no longer has power over you. The 10 commandments, the 613 commandments no longer have power over you. The power of the law when you died with Christ, and now you are united with one who was raised from the dead. So as a result, we can produce a harvest of good deeds for God. So now we're united with him. We're raised with him. And now we should all be producing a harvest, right? Of grace, of that same grace. Are we producing a harvest of grace unto everyone else? Or what are we mixing law and grace together? Like, what is going on? It says, when we were controlled by our old nature, sinful desires were at work within us. And the law aroused these evil desires that produced a harvest of sinful deeds resulting in death. So basically, what Paul is saying here is like, once the law came, it made you want to do the things that they said you cannot do. And he'll go on a little bit other, but he's going to break it down. And so basically, this is what he's saying. It erodes these evil desires. I didn't want the cookie till you told me I couldn't have the cookie, or till you told me it wasn't healthy for me. I had no desire for it until you told me that it was something about it that I should not have. Go to verse 6. It says, but now we have been released from the law. So we're all, everybody that say that they are a follower of Jesus, we're no longer under the law. We're released from the law, for we died to it and are no longer captive to its power. You're no longer captive. That means that the law holds you in captivity. The law is bondage. Now we can, so he said, now we can serve God, not in the old way of obeying the letter of the law, but in the way of living in the spirit. So by the spirit. So now we're reconciled by our spirit. It says, well, then, am I suggesting the law of God is sinful? Of course not. In fact, it was the law that showed me my sins. He said it was the law that made me aware. So he's not coming against the law or whatever. Like he said, okay, yeah, the law served its purpose. It showed me my sin. He said it showed me my sin. So he said if it was not for the law, I would not know my sin. I would have never known that coveting is wrong if the law had not said you must not covet. But sin used this command to arouse all kinds of covetousness, desires within me. If there were no law, sin would not have had that power. So he's saying the law, he's going back and he's reiterating, the law gave it power. The law gave it power. So let's go back to Eve. Everybody likes to go in on Eve, right? Let's go back to Eve real quick. Here it says, just like Eve in the garden, don't eat from that tree. The restriction made it more appealing. It made it more appealing during that time. When someone is told not to do something, their brain may respond by experiencing a loss of freedom, becoming more curious or rebellious, or focused more on the forbidden action, or having difficulty suppressing the urge due to how the brain processes instructions. So it's like a mix between psychology, neurobiology, and good old dose of human nature, which will break some of that stuff down a little bit later. But so it's the same thing. Like if I tell you, like, hey, such and such just walked in the room, but don't turn around, look, or don't turn around. Like naturally, as soon as I say don't turn around, you turn around. If someone say, hey, I have something to, they want to say something, but then they're trying to say like they don't want you to be offended or whatever, then that's one of the things that they may say, like, hey, don't take offense or don't be mad. As soon as they say that, you initially put this guard up. Initially, you start feeling some type of way because something was said and told you not to do it. You automatically did it. Our brain naturally works this way. So before we had neuroscience, before any of this, Paul was saying this is how your brain works. Before the psychologist had said it, Paul said this is how it worked. This is basically what happened to Eve. This is why sin has so much power. Like he's telling you, this is how the brain works. So you knew that he had to be speaking from God. It just had to be from God. He's telling us what science is telling us now. He said, at one time I lived without understanding the law. Now, this right here, some people feel like, okay, maybe once he's saying this statement, he's saying like before he was converted over. Some other people may look at it and say, well, he's talking about like the reincarnation or I'm not here to debate that part of it, but I would say what he said. What he said in the statement was, at one time, now when that time was, he lived without understanding the law. He had no understanding, no clue of what the law was. He had no knowledge of it. He was free. He was free. He was living his life. He was free. He says, but when I learned the command not to covet, for instance, because that was the instance that he used before. So, for instance, the power of sin came to life and I died. Once he said I died, he's talking about a spiritual death. He had a spiritual death just like Adam and Eve had. He had a spiritual death like Adam and Eve had. He said once it came in, so he's telling you what happened with Adam and Eve. He's saying the same thing happened to me, just like them. Once the law came in, once the judgment of good and evil came in, I died. So I discovered that the law's command, which were supposed to bring life, we thought was going to bring life, it brought a spiritual death instead. What I was saying earlier, a spiritual death. Had a spiritual death. He said sin took advantage of those commands and deceived me. So he said sin took advantage. Sin, that's something in your mind that's inner. Okay. So his mind is what he's saying. His mindset took advantage of those commands and deceived me. It used the commands to kill me. So his mind began to use these commands and began to take it as something to kill him. But still, the law itself is holy. It's good. And its commands are holy, right, and good. But how can that be? He's saying, okay, but how can it be? Somebody might ask him, but how can that be? Did the law, which is good, cause my death? Of course not. It wasn't the law that caused his death. He said sin used what was good. Sin took what was good and turned it to evil. Sin used what was good to bring my condemnation to death. So we can see how terrible sin really is. It uses God's good commands for its own evils and purpose. It uses God's good commands for its own evil and purposes. Let's look at Romans 7:14. It says, so the trouble is not with the law, for it is spiritual and good. The trouble is with me, for I am all too human, a slave to sin. He says it's with me because I'm all too human. I'm all too human. Let's break this down. Back here, I was telling you about it's a mix between psychology, neurobiology, and good old dose of human nature, right? So I want to come here and let's begin to break these verses down from that perspective with that mindset. So going here, let's go here. Romans 7:14, right? He says, so the trouble is not with the law, for it is spiritual and good. The trouble is with me. He said, it's with me. He said, I am the problem, for I'm all too human, a slave to sin. So psychology, the psychology are the human and the human nature part of this one. This would be psychology and the human nature together. Paul is acknowledging that the moral standards, the law, are not the problem. It's his own internal conflict. In psychological terms, this reflects to his cognitive dissonance, the tension between what we know is right and what we actually do, right? So, but neurobiology, from that perspective, Paul's statement mirrors the tug of war between your prefrontal cortex and your logical morality, decision making, and the limbic system. So where your emotions, your impulses, your desires are at. Even when we know what's right, the impulse-driven brain can overpower rational decision making, right? So even once you know what's right, it's kind of like the, little kid saying like, "Hey, I know that I'm supposed to do what's right, but it still makes it hard. It still makes it hard for him." So he's saying I'm not passing blame. I'm not passing blame. I understand it's with me. It is something about me. Romans 7 and 15 says, I don't really understand myself. He said, I don't really understand myself. For what I want to do, what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I really don't understand myself. We've all been there, really not understanding ourselves. For what I want to do, what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I do what I hate instead. This is like psychology. This is the classic human experience. This is the gap between intention and action. Psychologists call this the intention behavior gap. So once we really want to eat healthy, so we're trying to avoid gluttony. Once we're really trying to not cheat or not do certain, like not kill, let's be honest. Once we want to stay calm, we don't always succeed. We want to do what's right, but we don't always succeed. In a neurobiology perspective, this speaks to a breakdown between the executive function, our brains, which is our brain's ability to follow through with intentions, and the habitual and emotional responses. So neural pathways formed by repeated behavior, even if they're sinful habits, can override our conscious desire. So here, Paul's human nature, he's saying, "Hey, look, this is the struggle that I'm having. That I'm self-sabotaging." It's basically what he's saying. He hates what he does, yet he does it. It's raw. It's an honest confession that we all can relate to. Self-sabotaging, and it's a lot of times we self-sabotage ourselves. Like we know what we should be doing. We know what we need to do to get the business together. We know what we need to do to make the marriage work. We know what we need to do to get to the next dimension spiritually. We know what we need to do to mend a broken relationship. We know what we need to do to pass the test. We know what we need to do. But instead we sit and we do nothing. We sit and complain. We know how we should handle the person, but instead we do it a different way. It's where he says in Romans 7 and 16, but if I know that what I am doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law is good. As he says, but if I know that what I'm doing is wrong, this shows that I agree that the law is good. From a psychological perspective, he's acknowledging wrong is a sign of moral conscience and awareness. So he's saying, I'm conscious to it. I'm aware. And Paul is saying, my internal struggle proves I believe in the standard of right and wrong. So in therapy, in a therapy session, it would show that he has a strong sense of values, even if he's failing to meet them. So he has the strong sense of values, but this could reflect the activation of his anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in the error detection and self-awareness. So the conflict that shows that Paul's brain recognized the misalignment between his values and his actions. So he understands somewhere in here, I agree, my behavior is not right. I agree what I'm doing is wrong. I agree what I'm saying is not proper. my attitude towards this is not right. He said, I agree. So then look at Romans 7:17. He says, so I'm not the one doing wrong. It is sin living in me that does it. And just like the guy in the picture here, like we get annoyed with it. We're just like, I can't like. So Paul isn't shifting blame. He's recognizing a deep internal division. Like he's the presence of a powerful force, the sin nature that operates almost independently of his will. Like it parallels like a addiction behavior where a person feels overtaken by the urge despite their desire to resist it. Whatever that addiction may be. It reflects how the brain can be hijacked by repetitive sin patterns or deeply ingrained behaviors. The dopamine system, which responds to the reward and the pleasure, which, can reinforce the sin. So Paul is giving voice to the sinful nature inherited through Adam. So same thing when we said it, in Adam, where he said there's something in me that's broken and bent away from God. So no matter how much I try on my own, I can't do it. I can't get it. I can't like it's something stressing me with it. I can't I can't get it right. I can't get it right. Right? This is the stuff that we have to pay attention to. This is the stuff that we have to really say, like, hey, I have to shift. I have to shift. Because it all starts in our mind. It starts in our mind. It starts with our thoughts. He says, I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. I want to do what is right, but I can't. That's all of us. We want to do what is right. Are you extending grace? Are you living under the law of grace? Because just like us, we want to do what's right, and sometimes we can't. No matter, we can't say the right thing. We can't be at the right place. Like we're imperfect beings. Are you extending grace to other imperfect beings just like you want the grace extended to you? Because just like them, just like Paul, how he's saying in verse 19, I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. Some of the same people that have wronged you, some of the same people that have offended you, they walked away and just been like, I could have said that better. I don't even know why I said that. Okay, verse 20 says, but if I do what I don't want to do, I am not really the one doing wrong. It is the sin living in me that does it. I have discovered this principle of life. He said, this is the principle of life. It is a life principle. It is a life principle. That means it applies to me and you as well. Why? Because this is how the brain works. He says that when I want to do what is right, I inevitably do what is wrong. I love God's law with all my heart. It's some people that we say, hey, I love my spouse with all my heart. And I tried my best and got caught up in a situation. Maybe that's not nobody else's story, but I can tell you that that's been mine a couple times where I just thought that I thought that I thought that I knew what love was. That was the one thing. I thought I understood what true love was, and I didn't. And I didn't love myself. But anyway, so in that is the same thing. Says I love God's law with all my heart, but there is another power within me. So what is that power? What is that sinful power within you? Is it the power of lust? Is it covetousness? Is it jealousy? Is it greed? Is it money? What is it? What is your thing? but everybody has a thing. And so your thing may not be my thing, and my thing may not be your thing, but that gives me no right to judge you, to criticize you, condemn you. Because just like I'm under grace, you are under grace. Now I can readjust you, I can redirect you, I can reaffirm you, I can talk to you, I can guide you in love. Now that's different. I can, or how we say, I can straighten your crown up without telling the world that I straighten your crown up. I could do that. He said, I love God's law with all my heart, but there's another power within me that is at war with my mind. It's at war with my mind. Your mind is where all this stuff takes place at. Once you learn to control your thoughts, and you learn to control your thoughts, it'll begin to shift a lot of other things. And then you'll actually be able to hear clearly what's in your heart. Since this power makes me a slave to the sin that is still within me. This power makes me a slave. So there is another power within me that is at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to the sin that is still within me. And so here he goes. Oh, what a miserable person I am. It's miserable. It's not a way to live. What a miserable person I am. Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? That's dominated. It is dominated. To say something that is controlled is ruled. Sin and death. A lot. So he's saying that the law, the condemnation, the judgment from the law is a miserable life to live. It makes you a miserable person. Who wants to live that way? Why would I want to live that way? He said, who would free me? And I love how quickly he answers it for you. Thank God. The answer is in Jesus Christ our Lord. So you see how it is. In my mind, I really want to obey God's law, but because of my sinful nature, I'm a slave to sin. He said, in my mind. So first he give you the answer, and he said the answer is Jesus Christ. And then he goes back and clarify everything for you again. So you see how it is. In my mind, I really want to obey God's law, but because of my sinful nature, I'm a slave to sin. We have to be mindful of what we're actually walking under. If your life is miserable, ask yourself, is it somewhere in there? If I'm saying that I'm a believer of Jesus Christ, am I saying I'm a follower of Jesus Christ? And I think that my life is so miserable. Where have I allowed sin to abound? Where have I allowed the law to have more power over what I say that I believe in? If you say that you believe in Jesus, if you say that you believe in the works that he did, if you say that you believe that he got up with all power in his hand, that he rose from the dead, and that he defeated sin and death, and that you rose with Christ, and that you have eternal life, if you believe that, that's what you hold true to, then your life shouldn't be miserable. So leave that with y'all. Till the next time, a pop up, and I will close out with a little bit of chapter 8. I will close out with chapter 8. And so hope y'all are enjoying these pop-up sessions on being under grace, because we are no longer slaves to the law, and we have to quit living as such. Have to stop acting as such and walking as such. So with that, y'all have a great evening. I'm gonna enjoy my evening.